Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hutchins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Association of Nonprofits, and I am delighted to bring you another edition of MANP Connects, which we have been doing since April 2020, 1 month after the very famous now lockdown of March 2020 in the United States. And we started MANP Connects as a way to simply start connecting with people in our nonprofit community who at the time in a crisis and an emergency were desperately seeking information about what was going on, how to run their organizations, and how to get this, continue to get the support that they need for the increasing demands and the fast changing realities of what we as nonprofits faced in those years. And then quickly we realized that once the immediate crisis of people's health and needs for that, for the economic aftermath as well, we started to get a little bit of a handle of it. We realized that emergency information, we started to get a whole control of that. But then we realized how much we needed each other and how much we needed this community. And I have to say, I am waking up with a very full heart today because I was fortunate to have a really great conversation with some close friends last night. And we were reflecting on just how much we need each other. It's going to take a team, folks, to be resilient, to get through all the challenges that our friends and family and neighbors and community members and Mainers and Americans and world citizens are facing in this day and age with all the problems that our community is so collectively focused on in our particular area. And it does absolutely take community, and it takes people coming together as much in person as we can. And I'm sorry that I can't be with you all this morning in person, because last night when I was sitting with friends in person, we could feel how powerful it was to be right next to each other. And so I just want you to know I'm waking up with a full heart, and I'm picturing that all of you, we have over 70 people logging on right now from across the state of Maine. We're absolutely in community together to welcome you to this very special edition where we're going to be talking about culture in Maine and this special week that Cultural Alliance of Maine has begun. And I'm really excited to introduce you to our guests. I am going to first acknowledge our sponsor for MANP Connects, and that is Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. They shortened their name to Happy. And I was just like, look at that little face. That's a perfect introduction to how joyful I feel this morning. So in any case, I'm going to ask Mollie Cashwell, and is Ekhlas here this morning? Is she going to be able to join us? Good morning, Mollie. Hi, Ekhlas. How are you? Ekhlas Ahmed and Mollie Cashwell are the co-directors of the Cultural Alliance of Maine. And I'm just going to launch right in and invite one of you to tell everybody on this call what I'm talking about when I say that you guys, I promise, just like a good mom, I promise I won't refer to you as my baby out in public anymore. But I just wanted to say that's how I feel.
Well, you guys have been the best nest ever, to incubate an organization like CAM in. But I want to defer to Ekhlas to introduce us and introduce Cultural Heritage Week.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We're really excited to be here this morning. As you said, CAM was a leg that started with MANP just about almost a year during the pandemic to kind of have a space for the art and culture workers across Maine to come together and to be a unified voice. So Mollie was the first one who got started, and I joined not too long ago. And we just decided that I think the best way to start telling people about CAM was to host an event. My background is in education and in community organizing, and I thought that the best way to get people together was to host an event. And so happened that the event date that we chose was in March. And Mollie will tell you a significance of how this day kind of worked out the best for us to kind of introduce Cultural Heritage Week to the rest of Mainers here in Maine. So we decided that we can host this event, which will be happening on March 22nd at the State House. Do you want to share a little bit, Mollie?
Yeah, definitely. As Ekhlas mentioned, we booked March 22nd in the Hall of Flags, which turned out to be this really quite like magical. I can't claim that we planned it this way, but it's almost more interesting that we didn't. It's the start of Ramadan. I mean, it's the Persian New Year, is within that time frame. So that's really special. But it's also in the state of Maine. It's been in the statute since 1979. Which I think was under Governor Brennan, that the week after, the establishment of Maine statehood would be Cultural Heritage Week. And, I was looking through the Maine State Archives to see like these proclamations and to find, maybe what's been done around it. And it's been, not necessarily something that's prominently promoted. And Ekhlas and I thought that, since CAM was made possible really by kind of digital era that the pandemic brought in terms of being able to have regular meetings from Fort Kent to Kittery, right? We wanted to bring that possibility also to Cultural Heritage Week. So I hope all of you have logged on to culturalheritageweek.me, not logged on, but just visited. We have a virtual showcase there. We've been asking for submissions from around the state. I think we have almost 400 now, and it's just scratching the surface. But nonetheless, it really gives you, I think, a really powerful sense of what's going on in places in your backyard, maybe places you've never been to before. I mean, Rangeley is like massively on my list to go and explore the cultural community. So that's just been a really beautiful aspect of this. And we've been able to engage elected officials, our federal delegation, all sent messages of congratulations and support for this. We were able to just highlight how they're working in Washington on behalf of culture. I did not know that Senator Collins is the chair of the Senate Cultural Caucus, for example. So it's been a really nice opportunity to learn, how we can use our elected officials to continue to advance the cause of culture. So
Mollie, can I ask you, or Ekhlas, can you talk a little more about that showcase? Our team, when we saw what the two of you had put out, were so inspired by that. It's such a beautiful demonstration of how technology can really bring us together in a way that's accessible for those who have access to technology. It's a pretty simple way of sending the message of what you just said. And because we do have people on here who wouldn't necessarily consider themselves, and this might help us go into the next piece of like, what does Cultural Alliance of Maine really think of as culture anyway? But maybe you could start by saying, what are you looking for? Like I said, there are going to be people on this call who don't necessarily think of themselves as part of the arts and culture community. And yet I venture to guess you guys are quite open in terms of the types of things you want to see. And so I wondered if you could be a little more specific about that.
yeah, Ekhlas, you want to take that or should I?
Yeah, I think the virtual showcase is an example that art and culture, you don't have to exactly identify with one aspect of it, because it's music, it's art pieces, it is historical buildings, it is language, it is poetry. It is so much small things that we do on a daily basis that maybe we don't think of culture that we consider as culture. So when you look at the submission on the virtual showcase, you'll see that people are submitting all sort of videos, pictures of land here in Maine, historical buildings. For me, I've saw a couple of poetry. And those things that I think is really important that we are showcasing, and it's from all different parts of Maine. It is not just one part, and this is something that really, I think when we were starting this, we were really deliberate about, because when we were trying to talk about Maine, we wanted to make sure that people can take part of Cultural Heritage Week, even if they're far away, in Kittery, and they can make a submission to let us know what's happening in their towns. So I think the virtual showcase is to everyone, and I think that it's a great example and a reminder to tell us that even if you don't think you belong in that spectrum, the spectrum is widely open, and everyone is welcome to join and share their opinion.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I just want to highlight two items in the virtual showcase that I absolutely loved. It was like opening presents to see what people were submitting. One of them is a tiny miniature model of a country kitchen bread truck. That's in the, I believe, the Franco-American archives in Lewiston. And it just, opens up this whole concept of the history of entrepreneurship and the Franco-American community. And the other piece is an image, and I'm forgetting who submitted it, so I apologize, but it's a picture of a protest in 1998 of young queer Mainers protesting the failure to pass of an anti-discrimination law. And I can't speak exactly to the details of that, of the vote at the time, but essentially there was a bill that said you can't discriminate against someone based on their sexuality. It failed for whatever reason, and then there was a protest. And it just, to your point, Jennifer, it's just, I think, a really powerful reminder of, the culture wars, and they're still happening, and we still need to be resilient. Progress can be made, steps will be made backwards, and then they'll come forward again. And so I just found that it's a really beautiful image, and I encourage you all to go look for it.
Talking a little bit more about how the Cultural Alliance of Maine is thinking broadly about culture. I also noticed that you opened your website and showcase with a land acknowledgement for the indigenous people who were here before Europeans came over. And I wondered if you would talk a little bit about the meaning of that for you in terms of all of us learning. Sadly, in my case, too much later than I ever should have, the people who inhabited this land before my ancestors got here. And so I wondered if you had any reflections on that.
We have to decide who's gonna.
Go ahead, Mollie. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all, I hope everyone had the chance to watch yesterday, the State of the Tribes address. That was really, really powerful on so many levels. And, as Ekhlas and I have been building this broad partnership to make this week possible, we knew that this needed to be a cultural community effort. And we were so fortunate and grateful to have conversations with Wabanaki organizations to help us kind of think through this in a really meaningful way, because the concept of Maine Statehood Day is obviously not a universally rah-rah sis-boom-bah moment, and it needs to be a moment where we reflect actually on where we are and what it means, and take a 13,000-year perspective and not a 203-year perspective. I think it's also significant. I read the first, I believe, declaration of Maine Cultural Heritage Week, and the language has evolved over the years so much. I think the first one said something like, Maine has had incredible culture all the way back to the colonial times. Like that was like directly the quote of how they framed it. And obviously today, the proclamation that the governor released about a week ago, it certainly acknowledges Wabanaki culture, but as we all know, it's still a very, very important space to put a lot of energy in for all of us to make sure that, Wabanaki self-determination and Wabanaki culture and indigenous knowledge is central to how we think about our identity.
Yeah, thank you. Could you talk a little bit about what the Cultural Alliance Beyond Culture in Maine Week is about? Can you talk a little bit about the Alliance and your invitation to other organizations to join the Alliance in a longer term strategy? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, we're fairly new. So I think one of our biggest our biggest goal is to make sure that we establish ourselves. We make sure that we have a board that is truly representative of Mainers. We have a board that is diverse in not just in backgrounds, but in talents, but in perspective. So that has been what we've been doing, recruiting some people to join us on our board. And once that happens, I think there's going to be a lot of listening sessions, because that's actually one of our priorities. As an alliance, we don't want to come in and say, this is what we want to do. I think we want to listen to the voices of our community. We want to make sure that the programs we create are programs that people are going to use and are going to be helpful. and to make sure that people come and join us at the Cultural Alliance of Maine so that we can advocate for policies near and far here in Maine, but also in Washington, D.C., or even farther than that, so that we have policies that are changing things that are not working for us as Mainers. I know that one specific program that we just talked about, how culture in Maine is not just one group of people, but there have been so many groups that have lived here in Maine that have never found a safe space where they can come collectively to advocate for them as people. So I talked to Mollie about that we really need to have a BIPOC safe space for people, artists of all and cultural workers of all kind that have never found a space to share what policies do they need in place to help them, thrive here in Maine as artists and as cultural workers. So a lot of work that is still ahead of us. This Cultural Week that we've been planning has given us a scope of the amount of work that is awaiting on us. And I know that it's going to be a team effort for sure.
Do you want to add anything to that, Mollie?
No, I think she pretty much nailed all the points, where I guess the only other thing I would add is that, as we've learned about, we get contacted by organizations with, seeking advice, seeking connection. So getting a sense of, what people are facing. And it's really clear that, obviously pursuing good state level cultural policy and funding is important, but our municipal and our county levels are really, really ripe for some changes. And obviously that's so accessible to most of us, right? In a way that state advocacy can be more challenging. But, whether it's like how are design review boards, impacting how cultural institutions can carry out their missions, and equity issues are rife, I think, in our municipalities in terms of how cultural organizations are able to exist and engage our communities. So I'm really looking forward to just helping and creating a community where we can tackle those issues together and kind of dream about what we need to see change.
So I'm gonna, before I invite on our next guest, I want to just close with, I'm going to start with Mollie, and then Ekhlas, I'm going to, I'm going to start with Mollie. Mollie, what is your, if you could wave your magic wand and tomorrow things were different, what would you want to see change with regards to the work that you're doing?
In terms of, what we want to see change on a policy level.
Yeah, the change you want to see in Maine. Yeah.
I want to see the culture, so when we think, a lot of times the statistics and concepts we rely on are like, how big is the impact, right? Like the $2 billion contribution of the cultural sector. But I feel like that's like saying, like, what's bigger, your liver or your pituitary gland? And then just deciding like which one you want to keep or which one you want to like support. I see culture as being something that permeates everything, obviously education, but transportation. I mean, the showcase shows examples of how cultural and transportation intersect. I would like to see a cultural lens brought, just like we have a budget lens, right? It's like you can dream about you can dream about a monorail that like flies you from Kittery to Fort Kent in 5 seconds, but budget is going to come into play. Likewise, I would like to see a cultural lens around all policy decisions in one way or another.
That's great. Thank you. And Ekhlas, the reason why I stumbled over that is just because I realized that you might be willing to share a writing with us, but I want to give you a minute. Because I know I'm kind of springing on this on you. And so would you be willing at the end, Ekhlas is a writer, she's a poet. And would you be willing at the end to close out our session today? Would you be willing to read that poem?
Yeah, definitely. And just to add on to what Mollie said.
Yeah, and then I want you to answer the question too. Yeah.
And an introduction to the poem. I think there is so much that I wish we can redo, right? I'm an optimistic. I don't usually like to go backwards, but I think sometimes it's necessary for us to go backwards. And even this week, Cultural Heritage Week in Maine, and our first session when we had with the Wabanaki youth, and just talking about how science is in history, and how the Wabanaki tribe played an important role and continue to play an important role in science in Maine and beyond, and how Black artists and Black scientists have played a huge part in the history of making what today is science like. So I think I would love to see more policies in terms of educating our young youth in classrooms all across Maine and across the US. The history of the people change the narrative that is written in the book, because the book that I was teaching as a teacher didn't tell the actual truth of what America is. So that I would love some policies that tell America's truth, even if it's a harsh truth, tell it, because there is so much beautiful history, even in that rough truth, and to let our youth know what has happened and to help build them into, their authentic selves that are going to be amazing. I think society members that know how to be their true selves and to express themselves. I think that's something that is going to change not just culture and cultural workers, or it's going to change the whole narrative. So that's kind of to answer and an introduction to the poem.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much, Ekhlas. Thank you so much, Mollie. Ekhlas, I'll invite you back on in just a couple of minutes. You both are doing incredible work, and I'm just so proud of so many people have put so much effort into the formation of Cultural Alliance of Maine. And if you don't know a lot about it already, I really encourage you to do some research and get involved, because it's a great effort. It's been needed for a long time. Rachel, my next victim. How are you this morning?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Welcome to MANP Connects, everybody. This is Rachel Ferrante. She'll tell you a little bit about how she got to be part of the museum community in Maine. But I'm really delighted. For me, she represents, similar to Mollie and Ekhlas, just an amazing amount of youthful brilliance and care. And I'm just so delighted that these three young people are part of our cultural community. And so over to you, Rachel. What the heck are you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to, be with Mollie and Ekhlas and all of you during Cultural Heritage Week. It's really great what CAM is doing for all cultural institutions, and we certainly feel that at Maine Mill. Some of you might be familiar with us. We're formerly Museum LA, located in downtown Lewiston. We were formed in 1996, opened our doors in 2004, founded by community members as the mills were closing, literally salvaging pieces of historical artifacts from the dumpsters. So things were being thrown out, things were being, literally doors closed, and people in the community had the foresight to save that and create a collection from that. I joined the organization about 18 months ago, and I'm trying to build on that great foundation of this really incredibly unique collection, and have a bit broader of a mission and a vision for the organization. So we went public with our rebranding, which included a new name. So the Maine Museum of Innovation, Learning, and Labor. So MIL is the acronym, Maine Mill, to really be about telling the told and untold stories of all workers in our community. So innovation, learning, and labor, while a mouthful, is also what has been at the core of the stories that we've been telling since our inception. And we hope that it allows us to think a bit more broadly about what being a history and culture museum in the area means, and in order to create sort of an inclusive place. We have a really rich and diverse history in this area specifically, but in Maine, of course, broadly, and we're trying to now be a museum that feels like it tells that whole story.
Can you talk, Rachel, a little bit about you personally and what drew you to this work, and how did you land? And I happen to know that you haven't lived in Lewiston all your life. And so just curious about your personal journey to doing this work.
Yep. So I'm a Bates College grad, as is my husband, and we fell in love with Maine through Bates, and always planned to return to Maine to raise our family here. I was an art history major in college and worked at the Metropolitan Museum for the last decade or so. And we moved, we're one of so many pandemic moves back to Maine, but it was always sort of in our family's plan to move back here. And then when this job came up as an opportunity, it seemed like sort of the perfect next step for me personally. And I'm really excited about the future of what, I think this museum is going to be for the region.
And, I talk about nonprofits and the management of them and the organization of them on a daily basis. So I'm not going to lie, I was really looking forward to today to focus only on the culture part, but still our audience we are all kind of at heart, want to make sure nonprofits run as well as they can, because we have such important work to do. With you as a nonprofit leader, what do you think about on a daily basis as the sort of, what are the things that are trending for you in terms of either opportunities or challenges? Just sort of what's top of mind for you running a nonprofit in Maine?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I went to business school kind of for that exact reason. While I was working at the Met, I was actually sort of shocked to see a lack of business skills at one of the largest museums, or the largest museum in the country. And I think museums, lots of cultural institutions broadly, but museums specifically, which is what I can sort of speak to, have this interesting dichotomy because they need to be run like businesses, and the mission of serving the greater public is obviously paramount to what we do. So I sort of hold those two things in my mind all of the time. We are running a business. The goal is not to make money. The goal is the mission and the vision, and that's what drives us and what helps us make decisions every day. And for me, with this current job, the vision is, how do we become a broader, more accessible, relevant place for people, particularly out of the pandemic, particularly as an organization that was started focused on the mills. We're about the mills. Our collection is certainly hugely about the mills and the shoes and the brick making industries, but that's not really what's at the core of the story. The core of the story is, the workers and the people behind that work, and the people behind the work that is now driving Lewiston. And it's about the work that was driving the Androscoggin region before the mills existed. So how do we tell all of those stories in a powerful way that also continues to feel relevant and helpful for people in their lives, such that, museums are a need to have, not a nice to have? I think that's something all museums are kind of always trying to reinvent themselves and figure out.
Well, that it would be a good segue, if you're willing. I had asked you if there was something that really was a moment for you in terms of inspiring or particularly satisfying. And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but would you tell us a little bit about the project you're doing that is very external in terms of painting a more contemporary view of who's in this community that you're talking about?
Yeah, so we own the former Camden Yarns building, which is down on the Lewiston Riverfront, right next to.
Is that where the photograph behind you comes from, by the way?
No, it is not.
Oh,
but
okay.
I will share shortly an image of what I'm about to talk about.
Okay, great.
So we own that building. There's been a sign for about 10 years up on the building that says future home of Museum LA, because the museum has been talking for a long, long time about moving out of what is our current space, which has always been temporary, into that future home. And we're doing that now. So that's one of the major things, is we're in the midst of a capital campaign to move there. But the name change meant that we needed to take down that sign, which said Museum LA. And rather than replace it with a sign that said future home of Maine Mill, we wanted to put something up on the building that made it clear that this project was really happening now. And that people could understand that our moment is now, and that this was going to be a big impactful change for the Lewiston Auburn community. So what we've done, instead of putting up a future home sign, is we worked with artist Pigeon, who people may be familiar with. He's done work all over the state. He had never done anything in the Lewiston Auburn area. So he has a project called the Mainer Project, which I believe he started in 2005. He creates portraits of Mainers who have been made to feel excluded or like they didn't belong here or they're not from here. Some are, some are not, but they all feel like Mainers, and all at one point or another were made to feel that they weren't. So he created 3 new portraits of Lewiston Auburn residents, and along with 3 existing portraits, we put 6 Mainer portraits up on the side of our future building to highlight the different types of people that live in Maine and the different types of stories that we want to be a part of our museum, and, you know, the stories that are a part of our oral history collection and part of what drives the exhibitions that we do and the programming that we create for people.
So do you have an image that you're willing to
Yeah,
share?
let me put that in. Let me see if I can just add that here. Oh, that went to somebody directly. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So one of the things that this makes me think about, folks, is that this conversation with everyone so far, and particularly with Rachel, because she's talking about a very specific space. That's beautiful, Rachel. Thank you, Pigeon, out there in the ether. Amazing contribution. Wouldn't it be cool for us, like I don't have time, right? I'm raising teenage daughters, but wouldn't it be cool if we could spend a day driving around the state of Maine and looking for little treasures like this? This is not such a little treasure, but you know what I mean? Like these little unexpected contributions by our artists who, let's face it, see our world in a way that sometimes A, isn't valued enough, and B, is quite unique. And I just realized that if I could have any job right now, Kristen has a good question. Is that between Baxter and Main Street, Rachel?
It's on Beach Street. So if you know where the old train station is, which is now the Station Restaurant, or you know where FX Marcotte is in downtown Lewiston, it's right down at the end of Beach Street.
So Rachel, how do, if people want to find out more about the museum, and can they visit you?
Yeah, you can visit us at our current location, which is at 35 Canal Street. And if you've never been here before, it's a little difficult to find. So you plug in 36 Chestnut Street. Thanks, Kelly, for the link to our website. You plug in 36 Chestnut Street and we're at the end of the long parking lot there. So we have a current exhibition up called Who We Are, Who Are We? That has some of the original drawings of Pigeon's work, as well as 10 new oral histories that we've collected with a professor at Bates College. And you're able to listen to those fully on our website now and download the transcripts, which we've added to our growing oral history collection of about 300 stories, as well as some great interactive pieces. So, and then we have our permanent collection of our industrial machinery upstairs that we also can give tours of to people. So would love to have all of you. I also want to quickly put in a plug for Pigeon, because he will be back in our current space talking about this work that I posted a picture of on the afternoon of March 28th at 5 p.m. in our current space. So would love to have you all join us for a community conversation where he'll talk a bit about his process and his work, and these works in particular.
Thank you, Rachel. We're so excited that you and your husband decided to come back after graduating and settle in Maine. I'm really excited to see what you accomplished with the museum. You're doing great work. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody, I'm going to ask Ekhlas to come on in a few minutes and read her poem. But before that, I saved a couple of minutes just to see if one or two of you, I'm not going to call anybody out per se, but would anybody want to just pop on and tell me what culture means to you in your work? it would just be great to see if I can hear a voice or two about what does this all mean to you and what's important to you doing work in Maine? And Kelly, I'm going to rely on you to see if you can help me figure out if there's anybody who raises their hand or looks like they might want to just pop on with me for a second. I know, you have to check and see if you have the right clothes on. Sylvie, I see your hand. Hi.
Hi, I'm here from Maine Downtown Center, an
Oh,
MDF.
cool.
And
Thank you for being brave enough to just pop in. And so what does culture mean for you and your work? Good morning.
Morning. Yeah, I'm happy to. We're excited about the Cultural Heritage Week and to be a part of that with CAM. And really, culture is a huge focus around the work that we're doing because it's through these small downtown centers across the state that we are looking to help preserve and help encourage, community and economic development around that historic preservation. That's all about connecting with the community, finding out from these local community leaders, like what it is that's important to them, what makes their area unique, what makes their downtown unique, what their story is. And so it's really invigorating work in terms of learning just the different stories that come out of each town and how there's opportunity for just bolstering that and making sure that the connections and the synergy within a space and regionally, but of course our focus is on those downtowns is strengthened, is highlighted. It's the reason so many people come to Maine. It's the reason so many people settle in Maine or come back to Maine. It's certainly the reason that I decided this was my home. So
I'm kind of curious, Sylvia, I'm totally putting you on the spot, but I'm curious because my background is in arts and economic development and the creative economy. And, sometimes it's been a little challenging to convince people who are so focused on the outcome being a cash flow economy. Sometimes it can be a little hard connecting the dots, and yet clearly you and I get it, right? Like, without culture, there is no society to have an economy for, right? So
exactly.
I just wondered, again, I'm putting you on the spot, but
no, it's
how
actually
do you
really
grapple with that? Because I know that downtowns, right? Sometimes we frame it around, wow, vibrant downtown means that there's a lot of commerce going on. And yes, but if we don't have the culture, we don't have a society to have commerce for. So
absolutely, it's all tied together. And we have been writing some letters of support recently to some different partners who are going after some CDS earmarks, and it's just so important to highlight the fact that, like, you walk into a downtown, that center, that kind of that heart of a community, and if you see that the buildings are crumbling or the buildings are shut down, it doesn't give you the indication that you want to, like, stay and shop or stay and investigate. It certainly doesn't give you the impression that you want to invest in opening a business there or move there. And on the other side, when we work with these communities and these towns that have really successful Main Street programs and vibrant downtowns, it's those communities that when folks are driving through or you come into them, you're like, oh wow, I want to stay a bit. I want to learn more about it. I want to go into this museum. I want to go into the coffee shop. I want to stay. And it is those cultural dollars that go, so much further in sustaining a community than many others. And it gives you that indication of this might be a great place to live. So I think, it's so important to amplify that whole story and that whole feeling. And we're working on an entrepreneurship ecosystem project right now. And it's focused, kind of in these downtown centers, because the vibrancy there allows for that rich and diverse economy that can sustain a community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sylvie.
Thank you.
And, I wish I had time to get more people. I realized that I was trying to squeeze in things here, but I just want to make one plea to all of you. Our arts in particular, our broadly defined arts organizations have suffered the most. They were the first to close. They were the last to open, and we take them for granted. And so everyone on the call today, I want to inspire you to think about this weekend, either going to the theater or going to an art gallery or reading some poetry, but more importantly, go on Amazon and buy a book of poetry from a Maine poet, or sign yourself up for a theater show, or go to one of the museums and don't worry about paying the entry fee if you can, if that's, you have the means to do that, for sure. Or if you don't, reach out and just let them know how much you appreciate them in your community. Thank you. At this point, oh, sorry, Mary Alice, she's absolutely right, not Amazon, boo. Stand corrected, stand corrected. Ekhlas, are you able to join us? I heard that you shared the other day at another CAM event your wonderful writing, and I'm just so touched and honored that you'd be willing to share it with our community today. And everybody, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, I want to make sure we end today with Ekhlas's poem and not me. So, because you don't need my energy after hearing from one of our Maine poets. So I just want to say, fun fact, next Sunday is Maine Maple Sunday, which is part of Maine culture. And thank you again to Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. And we hope we will see you next month on April 22nd, where we're going to be focusing on our libraries, actually. So with all of that, our MAMP team is always here. Please reach out to us with just about any question, frankly. And I'm going to ask Ekhlas to close our meeting of community and hope with your poem. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And not Amazon, definitely local bookstore, but if not, local libraries. I am a board of the Portland Public Library, and it's been a great tool for me since I was really young, and maybe it's one of the places where I've learned how to write poetry. I started writing poetry to express myself, but to express it in Arabic. I actually started, my first few poems were in Arabic because that's my second language, and eventually it was English. And I was going through this time in my life where I was really conflicted of how do you become, or how do you define Sudanese American? So something in me said, you don't have to define it. You are an American. And this poem is called I Am an American. I am an American today, not someday. Inserting my authentic African self in every city, every state, and every history book that has been written. I'm an American not because I was born here, but because my heart, my soul, and my sorrows, and my future promises are buried deep down in the soil and concrete of this nation. Yes, I am American, not because I speak English, but because my tongue knows how to roar in many languages, knows how to comprehend, read, and rewrite the stories that haven't been written. I'm an American not because I drink my morning coffee with a little cream, but because I drink it dark, just like how I was taught in the motherland. With every sip I take, tasting the bitterness of my experiences. I'm an American not because I take the subway to my place of work, but because I have walked miles, stones to find my final destination, a place that I call home, Maine. I'm an American not because I wear a t-shirt and pants, but because I wear my abaya and my hijab proudly with no fear. We don't sit at the dining room table or eat on each plate. It is the center of the floor in our living room that has become our threshold. Our Thanksgiving meal does not include turkey or mashed potatoes in gravy, but make sure you expect fufu and plantains to be the center of our meals. I'm an American not because my father fought in the Civil War that eventually ended slavery, but because he and I and others still have cut open wounds with no medication or no plan of heal wounds. My eyes cry for my America, while my feet dances to my African beats, holding on to home on the top of my tongue, sewing these pieces of my diverse self. Every fabric has many identities, leaving each needle to write its own story. I'm an American, not yesterday, but today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ekhlas.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.